Congressman Darrell, Issa, are you there?
I sure am.
How are you, sir?
Yes, and it's good. It's Bill Maher's kind of gone off the deep end.
Yeah, I think.
Even for Bill Maher, for years, and I don't want to dwell on it, but for years, Republicans would go on, and there'd be like 4 Democrats surrounding us, but they would let us at least get a point out, and you could change some hearts and minds on some important issues, but today it's just Bill Maher being mean. And it's a shame because he's not funny as a result.
Correct.
And I grew up with George Carlin, and to me, you can completely disagree on a subject and still enjoy a good comedian. He's just lost it right now, and if he's listening, as he should be, he needs to wise up and get funny again.
Right.
Bill Maher listens to our show, so I know he's out there listening. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I totally agree because, let's face it, humor is the best medicine, and that guy lost his medical bag, let me tell you.
So what was the reason? I'm just curious.
Why?
When you're in office, you're a congressman. You're getting, what they refer to as earned media. They're meaning that different cable shows are reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, we want you to come on and talk." What is the motivation for going on a show like Bill Maher? Which, by the way, I applaud you for doing. But I'm just curious, what's the discussion behind the doors? What made you do it?
I was on 13 times over 14 years, starting in 2003, basically when I went on. During the recall of Gray Davis. And, he was totally a Democrat in California who couldn't understand why anyone would get rid of somebody as inept and indecisive as Gray Davis as the lights went out. And I went on to explain to him that, if you're part of the lights going out on your state, you probably should be asked to leave for somebody who can at least, keep your state from going bankrupt. Oh, you know what? We've got the same thing going again, don't we?
I was just going to say, how long are we going to put up with this?
We're not putting up with it. You can go anywhere, not just a gun shop. You can go anywhere, including liberal Encinitas right now, and you're going to see people who their mask is around their neck or in their pocket. They're socializing. They're in bars. They're standing in restaurants. They're basically ignoring stay home little by little. And that's not conservatives. That's not people who failed to vote for Newsom. That's people who voted for this governor who know that the numbers don't support the continued quarantine of the American people in California.
So okay, just to clarify, everybody, you're running for Congress in the 50th, which is out East County and inland north. If it even covers San Marcos and up into Riverside, it's the seat that Duncan Hunter left.
The best way to look at it is until 2012, it was 3 people's district. East County was Duncan Hunter, San Marcos and Escondido was Brian Bilbray, and Temecula and all that other rural area, all the tribal areas was mine. And they redistricted it in 2013. And it belonged to the 2 Hunters after that. But it's going to be where I serve again for a number of years.
And talk about why should gun owners vote for you?
Track record matters. I know you had my opponent on, and he's a gun owner and says he's a different kind of Democrat. But the reality is that he worked in the Obama administration, which couldn't have been more anti-gun rights. He's got plenty of pictures with Bernie Sanders, which, by the way, is actually good. Bernie's not the worst in the Democratic Party. But the reality is that he's going to join, if he's elected, he's going to join a party that consistently, as a party, attacks, whether it's Michael Bloomberg or whatever, Second Amendment rights. On the other hand, I have 18 years of a 100% pro-Second Amendment voting record. I didn't just get the NRA's support. I was featured and spoke at their national convention and was awarded their highest award because I've been there fighting, including in the situation with Fast and Furious, where if the Obama administration had had their wish, they would have gotten a new assault weapons ban, justifying it based on the guns that they were shipping to Mexico illegally. and we were able to show it and push back. So, I think if you serve on judiciary for 18 years, where your constitutional rights are protected, and you have probably 1,000, including all the amendments, votes, you're pretty well defined. So I would say, he's going to promise you he's going to be a different kind of Democrat. I've shown that I'm exactly the kind of pro-Second Amendment person that you want, and 18 years of 100% isn't an accident.
I think that's excellent. Right. I really do. What about some priorities when you, if you get elected in November and are honored to serve the folks of East County and North San Diego? What are some Second Amendment priorities that you'd like to, maybe let's split it up. What's possible, and what would you like to see, and then what do you think is possible?
Well, look, it's possible that we can continue preserving people's rights. It's possible that with President Trump getting another term, that we won't just have a court that will make decisions like they made twice in Washington, D.C. to restore Second Amendment rights when those had been taken, but that we'll get additional cases that would take on, for example, the idea that states can define for the federal government what your gun rights are. And that's probably the biggest one. And the easiest way to look at it is I respect federalism, but states have to respect interstate commerce. I represented the Marines of Camp Pendleton for 18 years. Those Marines, whether they're at Camp Lejeune or they're at Quantico or wherever in the world, or they're in Afghanistan and Iraq, when they get orders to come into California, as you can imagine, they bring their personal firearms. Almost without fail, at least one of their personal firearms, usually a rifle, is illegal, or its magazine is illegal under California law. That's got to change, and it's going to take a court, and the court's going to come from a president, and President Trump has proven that even though he used to be a Democrat, and he used to be on the wrong side of a lot of issues, if you listen to his earlier speeches 20, 30 years ago, he has solidly supported the Second Amendment, and that means that the judges fairly interpreting the Constitution are going to make the same decision you and I make, which is we may not like everything the First Amendment allows people to say, but we know that as long as the First and Second Amendment are equally preserved, our republic will continue to be the place that where we can have that debate.
Yeah, and let's face it, the Democratic Party back when he was part of it is not the Democratic Party of today.
No, there was a time when I came to Congress in January of 2001, and we had peace and prosperity, and the Democratic Party had just voted along party lines for the assault weapons ban. It was in place. It was one of the hallmark pieces of legislation of the first 2 years of the Clinton administration. And guess what? We were able to get it to expire, and there were a number of blue dogs that agreed with us. Almost every one of those blue dogs is gone now. And that's one of the challenges in Congress is, when you simply are talking about what does the Constitution say, it used to be that the definition of a blue dog was they would fairly read it and usually agree with most Republicans. A couple of Republicans would go off the reservation and not understand it, but you would make up for it by having thoughtful Democrats, with the exception of maybe Colin Peterson. Just a handful. These guys are gone. Nancy Pelosi has driven them out of the party.
It would seem that way.
Yeah, it sure does.
So we have you for one more segment. Yeah. I want to make sure that we ask you more questions. I do appreciate everything you've done for the Second Amendment. I want to ask you more questions on what's going to happen after you get elected in November, because I think right now you're the front runner. I think the district and your message, I think it resonates well. So I think you're definitely the front runner. And I want to talk about what happens after you get into office. But we're gonna hold you over for a short break and get right back to you.
All right, buddy, hang on. We're gonna come right back, folks. You're listening
All right. So we're talking with Congressman Darrell Issa, and who's running for election in the 50th congressional district. And Darrell, I met you on the campaign trail a few years ago, and at an event. But the first time I actually heard you was in the early '90s. When I was in high school, and a buddy of mine pulls up in his brand new truck, and he was showing off his brand new security system in his brand new truck, and it was this really cool security system. If you got too close to the truck would actually say, it would say, "Protected by Viper, stand back." And years later, I found out that was your company and your voice, right?
Absolutely, and the protecting things we care about is important, and that's why we're having this particular half hour. Is that not only does the Second Amendment protect people's person, but they protect our liberties. And I did have 20 years of building a security and electronics company that continues to this day, and I've now had 20 years of trying to protect our rights in Washington.
Which was the harder job?
When you're only dealing with car thieves, you're working with a better class of people.
I couldn't help myself, and I had no idea that you started Viper. And folks, that's one of the number one, and it is the number one security system for your car. So, job well done.
Well, it's the ingenuity of the person trying to stop the car thief and the ingenuity of the car thief have to be matched. And, the ingenuity of those who want to redefine our Constitution, not just the Second Amendment, but piece by piece, all of those things, make it a living document rather than an original intent. It's the same sort of thing. I'll never forget, Anthony Weiner was on Judiciary, and you can imagine, as famous as he became later for his pictures, he was a clever guy who was constantly coming up with amendments that sounded harmless until you dug into them and realized that there's a reason that we don't amend the Constitution. Is that the reality is, we have what we want in this country, which is a level of freedom without anarchy. It works. And we expect the people we send to Washington to protect that level of freedom. Most people that are listening in your audience, they don't want anything from the government except for the government not to do them harm. Mm-hmm. They want what they were given from God, to be protected from their government taking it away. And that's what our founding fathers believed. It took them hundreds of years of fighting despots, kings, to come up with the language that they came up with. It wasn't spontaneous overnight. I always remind people that the British gave us our form of government by showing us all the mistakes that came before us. And I often feel that that's the reason that we still have such a great kinship with the British, is that they didn't get everything we got, but most of what we got because of their efforts.
And you're very appreciative of your efforts, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment. Indisputable that you've stood up for various areas of the Second Amendment when they came along. Very much appreciative of that. One question I have to ask you. Sure. It gets a little heated. A lot of people are not happy with the idea that you didn't run in your old district. They don't feel you supported the candidate in your old district enough, and now you're running in another district, in East County. How do you respond to those? And these are people in the district, in the 50th district, that kind of are frustrated by that idea. And I think that there are also people in your old district that are frustrated, and people that are a part of the Republican Party that are frustrated. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, when I announced that I would be joining the Trump administration and I wouldn't be running for re-election, there were some people who came and said, "Oh, we're going to miss you." But at that time, nobody, including Diane Harkey, who vied to be my successor and I endorsed and gave her money and raised money for her, nobody seemed to have an objection. To be honest, Diane had won numerous races, including every single voter in the district. She had won overwhelmingly when she was selected. She did not prevail, and I have only one regret, which is that on Election Day, I was on television at 4 p.m. in Washington, and I predicted that because the party hadn't put money in, because she'd never been close, she lost by 13 points. I predicted that, no, she was not going to prevail. That was a mistake. And everyone in their political career makes a mistake now and then. So to everybody, including Diane, it didn't make the difference between her winning and losing, but it's a mistake, and you own up to your mistakes when you make them. It was only a mistake to accept a nomination from Donald J. Trump to serve in his administration. It was only a mistake to go see him in Trump Towers before he was elected. It was only a mistake to campaign for him, even in a district that he lost by 9%, only for one reason, is I had no idea that I was going to be blocked by Senator Menendez of New Jersey, and that the Senate wouldn't have the guts to tell him to go take a walk and overrule his committee veto. That was a mistake, I got to tell you, I couldn't have made, because I served on foreign affairs for 18 years, including with Bob Menendez. I didn't expect foreign affairs, which is normally pretty nonpartisan, to do that. But Menendez didn't just do it to me. He did it to countless ambassador nominations of President Trump. And so why am I running in the 50th? I'm running in the 50th because, contrary to what my opponent says, I'm not old, I'm not tired, I'm not ready to go sit in a rocking chair. And because I didn't get confirmed for a position in the Trump administration, bringing honest government to other countries, which is what he had nominated me initially for, I'm going back where I can, quite frankly, help drain the swamp. And, the president's never needed, and more than he does now, investigations to go forward into a series of unlawful events that have gone on even while he was president. If you think about it, the actions on the last day of the Obama administration, unmasking General Flynn, those are terrible. But imagine this. The next day, Jeff Sessions is the Attorney General, and that organization has continued, along with Defense Intelligence and others, continued to undermine the president, leaked and wrongfully disclosed things time and time again. If you look at what the president calls pencil neck, Adam Schiff, everything Adam Schiff got away with, he got away with because holdovers from the Obama administration and people that are deeply embedded have continued to undermine this president in a way that is wrong at best, criminal in many cases, and not living up to their oath of the Constitution, no matter what.
I think that brings up a couple more questions. One is, if when you're elected, what Republicans have been so frustrating. They don't, the leadership, there's a huge lack of leadership. They seem to, roll over to Democrats even when they're in the majority. So 2 questions. One is, if and when you get elected, what are you going to do to make sure that your office is as responsive to the voters in your district as Duncan Hunter's was? And 2, what will you do to make sure that there's some leadership by Republicans on all levels to make sure that, some of these things don't happen, like what you just described?
Well, first of all, you lead by leading, you lead by inspiring. If I put a call in right now to Jim Jordan or Mark Meadows or any of the other people who came up through the ranks as my subcommittee members, they would all tell you that we led the fight for the years that I chaired, ranking member, and then chaired the oversight committee. We led the fight, and we led the fight with John Boehner, then Speaker, and then Paul Ryan later, but calling us knuckleheads, telling people not to give to our campaign committees, doing everything they could to make us less of an inconvenience. But just as Jim Jordan never stopped fighting, eventually Devin Nunes discovered, that he had to be on our side, not playing nicey, and he became a real fighter. Those people become the next generation's models. And that's what you do. The amount of times I was called to Boehner's office and told, it was wrong and you shouldn't do it and so on. You looked and said, I'm going to have a discussion with the speaker, but at the end of the day, I've got to do the job. I've seen the evidence. I know why I'm doing these investigations. I know where the wrong is. And so do my subcommittee people. When we took on Lois Lerner in the IRS, I cannot tell you how many times the Ways and Means Committee, which is a tax committee, kept saying, oh, no, we'll handle this. But they had already decided that there was no there as to all the Tea Party groups in the United States. And we looked and said, yes, there is. And we're going to continue pursuing it. And we never let up on it. And that particularly was one of the things where Jordan held a lot of the hearings in addition to mine. But we do those things. I was the only chairman during the entire time we were in the majority, from 2008 on. I was the only chairman to hold anyone in contempt, and I held both Lois Lerner and Eric Holder in contempt. The important thing isn't that I held him in contempt. The important thing is when Eric Holder came to the floor, we not only were able to successfully hold him in contempt, but we got 12 Democrats to vote with us. The fact is, you lead and people will follow if the truth is on your side.
Okay, we have 1 minute. What about responsiveness to your constituency, the folks in the district? I have a lot of issues with Duncan Hunter and everything that happened, and it was very frustrating. But one thing I never had an issue with Duncan Hunter's office was how responsive they were. If somebody had a problem and he agreed with you, they were all over it. What can we expect from Darrell Issa's office in the 50th?
Well, we call that casework and constituent work, and the history of my doing it is not only fabulous, but one of his lead people he hired when I retired, Amy Walker, and she's going to stay on. She's continued on in his staff and presumably would stay on in mine. But having the right team to be able to do it is important. Here's the other part of it. Duncan Hunter, when he came in as a freshman, he looked to all of us to help him get the job done. One of the advantages you have when you have 18 years of seniority, when every other chairman or ranking member, depending upon whether we get the majority, these are people that are either your classmates you came into Congress with, or you have 18 or 20 years of working with them. When you make a phone call and say, I need your help, you get it. Even today, literally every day, including today, I'm able to call people who used to be on my staff, or I knew them when they were on somebody else's staff, and now they're high-ranking in the Trump administration. I make a phone call, and because I've been there and been fighting, they help us, and we're doing that every day right now. So that
Good.
Soft power you build over 18 years. I know it took more than a minute.
Nope, that's good. I think people need to hear it. People need to hear what you just said, because there are people wonder. People want to know. The district was kind of blindsided by what happened with Duncan Hunter, and they're used to some good things, and they're concerned about some bad things. And this is the first time they've had an open seat in years, and this is the first time they've had somebody not named Hunter running in decades. So I think it's a concern. But I really do appreciate your time, and I really do appreciate your Second Amendment track record in Congress. And I hope, are we going to see at our Second Amendment celebration dinner on August 15th?
If they let us come in person, I will be there. If I have to be 6 feet away, I'll be there. Close with one thing. The Hunters, Duncan Hunter Sr., Duncan Hunter Jr., they both cared about the men and women of in uniform, the people who served for their entire careers. They both served, as I did, in the military. And of all the things that district has represented and will continue to represent under my leadership is support for the men and women who have served their country.
Excellent. Congressman Darrell Issa running in the 50th.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Talk to you down the road.
Anytime.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back.
Without someone doing something about it, it's not going to get any better.